Join Hans and Scotty tomorrow from noon to 3 at RGS Exteriors, 4235 Farm Road in West Jordan. Question of the morning. Jazz have lost 60 games for the first time ever. Good news or bad news? David goes his own way. Bad news, but way worse than that. It's disgusting that the Jazz have dropped so far in a few years. I feel extremely bad for the players who have shown hard hustle and a never give up attitude. I am extremely disappointed in ownership for allowing Mr. Ainge to destroy the reputation of a great franchise that the Millers built from the ground up. I believe Mr. Ainge has ruined Jazz basketball for the foreseeable future.
Well, that's a big question. For the foreseeable future. All the other stuff, if the future, foreseeable as it may be, is ruined, then this was just an awful move. And it did destroy, at least for a period, I mean, who knows what it's going to be in 20 years from now, all that stuff. But if this doesn't pay off, yeah, then it was absolutely horrendous. I agree.
Scott says 15% chance of getting Cooper Flag. Is this worth it? Would you gamble your retirement with that little chance of hitting the jackpot? What a foolish exercise this has been.
That storyline has been pushed, and it's false. It is not. The second the draft begins, your odds can continue to increase.
So that, I guess, is why he put 15, not 14. He was allowing for that 1% increase from the first couple of teams.
Right, but it could get down to a 33% chance. It can get down to a 50% chance.
Cool, but that's not what it is right now. It could get that far, yes.
And that's not what it is for the 2047 draft right now either. That has about as much relevance as the 2047 draft. Unless the rules are changed. As long as the rules stay the same, every draft in the history of going, not in the history, but in the future of drafts will always have those odds. That's ridiculous. That doesn't mean anything when you get down to it because the team that finishes with the best non-playoff record has no chance to get the number one pick. So within 2 minutes, your odds will continue to go up, 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 up.
I think your odds start in a better place than that because the number one player isn't the only player you really want. And he's the one you want the most.
Not necessarily.
But
this year, yes.
Right, this year. And that's what I'm talking about, is this year. There are other good players in this draft who will be the best long-term. Well, that's why they've got a huge scouting department and they spend money flying all over the place.
Cooper Flag will be the best long-term. I don't need to fly all over the place.
Right, but who is the next best? And who is the next? If they do end up drafting 4th or 5th, they could still get a really good player who helps the rebuild. Get the right guy. Even if
you draft 8th, you can get a really good player. If you draft 23rd, if you have the first pick of the second round.
So if they get a really good player, then this was worth it.
But that has nothing to do with these draft odds.
Yes, I've moved beyond the draft odds. We've discussed this every day for a week. Your odds are, well, not completely. What I'm saying is your odds are better of getting a good player because there's so many good players. There's supposed to be so many good players in this draft. So you have the chance of getting a really good player who helps you, whether his name is Cooper Flag or not. And yes, Cooper is the name. That's the name you want. But if you can't get him, you can still get somebody really good who helps the rebuild so you're not loitering in the bottom half of the league forever and you can start to build up and one day challenge.
That's like, duh.
So if you hit, then this is fine.
Yeah, but
you got to go down. You got to go down.
Your job, not necessarily. I don't know if I agree with that because Justin Zanuck said their job doesn't change. They're required to get a good player in every draft.
But once you get good and you start drafting in the 20s, that becomes very difficult. And depending on the draft, sometimes it's impossible. We can go back and find drafts where there aren't any different makers after you're drafting 20. So, yeah, his point is true, but we all know
and go
when
get
you have
Austin
a better
Reeves.
pick.
He wasn't even drafted.
Yeah, there you go.
So I don't even need the draft.
Some people are all on board. Craig, this is great news. Matt, capture the flag with 4 exclamation points. While Daniel's just checked out. It's managed to make me lose all interest.
That's only temporary, though. Record-setting franchise losing is going to make a lot of people check out. But that's
losing
temporary.
has a history of doing that in sports.
Once record-setting wins come back, you will be in completely.
Jason, I feel bad for the players. They've now ruined the last 3 years of short careers.
This is golden for these guys. Isaiah
money,
Collier, if
lots
he
of
went to
money.
any place else.
Yeah, well, for the veterans, lots of money and no pressure. And for the rookies, a chance to play instead of sitting on the bench.
Right. And you're in the league. I've never felt bad for a professional player unless they have some personal tragedies and so forth. But losing a game.
It's a famous quote about those checks don't have L's and W's on them.
Yeah. And people will tell you about that. Yeah, they're affluent and they don't have to worry about money where they feel, oh, it's not about the money. Yeah. You ever hear a poor person say it's not about the money?
Ryan says it's so worth it. They were not a playoff team. If they finish bottom 1 or 2 and they're guaranteed a top 5 pick, the probability of getting a star has risen significantly. Just getting a solid player is nearly a guarantee.
This year, I would underscore nearly. Yeah, but I have to see who the player is. But I get his point. You should be able to get a solid player if you have a top 5 draft pick. But plenty of teams,
have not
this one, have
not done
botched
that.
it.
Yeah,
those are facts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
David, this is great news if they get flag. David doesn't want to hear about anybody else turning out to be a really good player.
Well, that's short-sighted. But obviously the goal is him. I understand that. But it's a goal that normally when you set goals, it's up to you whether you're going to achieve them or not. Here, there's a bit of good fortune involved. So you can't really set the goal of getting him. You can set the goal of getting a good player, which should be the goal of every draft. For every lottery team and every year, really. If you feel there's a player there, and I mean, you're drafting a player, you're not just throwing something at a dartboard and say, what the heck, let's take him. But you can't really have a goal of getting Cooper Flagg because it's not up to you. You've done your part.
You have lost 60 games.
Yeah, they've played it well enough to put themselves in position to get him.
Mark, it is only good news if they win the lottery. Nothing else makes this season tolerable.
Yeah, you don't know that, though, man. You can't say that. The history is just littered and riddled and dominated by players who were not the number 1 pick. Freaking MJ wasn't the number 1 pick. So, I mean, come on. I mean, sure, there's been plenty of guys who have been great, who were the number 1 pick. The greatest of all, of course, being Magic.
Magic was the number 1 pick. 5 titles for Tim Duncan. He is the number 1 pick. Shaq and LeBron. But even at number 1, there's a bunch of busts mixed in there, so you never really know.
So you
and
can't
that's why
say
we watch.
that the only thing worth doing this for is the number 1 pick.
Scott says this is all necessary news.
Yeah.
They must lose 60. They must get a good pick. They must get a good player. And so the process goes.
Those good player, good pick, good player. Yeah, absolutely. If this doesn't turn out, then it's a huge disappointment in terms of, not literally on the court. It's probably the biggest disappointment they would ever have. Obviously losing in the finals and all that stuff. But that's decided on the floor. With this, if you do not get a quality player,
if you pick Enes Kanter with the 3rd pick,
that's an awful situation. But I think they'll be okay there. I think this will happen. They'll get a quality player. Question is, can you get 2 quality players? You got Minnesota's pick, and what can you do there? What can you do to jumpstart this? Because if you get Flagg, hopefully Angel will be asked that, and Jay-Z and their year-end spiel. that, just hypothetically, and hopefully they'll play along with it because you won't know until May, when the middle of May, whenever that is, when the draft lottery is, and they'll do their end of the year well before the middle of May. Hopefully they'll play along. Just the idea being, I think it's May 15th there, buddy.
Okay. Go ahead. Play along. Monday, May 12th. Circle it on your calendar.
It's so distracting when you check out.
I'm going to check out. I was right there with you.
Many times you check out.
But not this time.
Right.
Monday, May 12th. Circle it.
That was good. I'm glad we knew it was 3 days earlier. Yeah, I checked out. It's distracting it's not distracting to you, it's distracting to somebody else. That hopefully they'll play along with, if you get a top whatever, first pick, second pick, third pick, do you think that will help jumpstart the rebuild? And hopefully they don't respond back, well, we'll have to see where we're drafted. I mean, it's a theoretical question, but it's a principle that I think is worth to be asked, and I think it's worth to the fans to be able to answer it and not just continue to talk in nebulous terms, because you got your coach standing up there saying that we need to represent the fans better. Well, then you need to give the fans some information. And this constant shutdown deal it's so tiring. I mean, these people are invested in your franchise. You hold their emotions in your hand, metaphorically. You owe them something.
They don't care.
It doesn't matter.
They do not.
It doesn't matter. They still owe them something. And they owe them some explanations. I mean, they don't hold my emotions, and I'm not a Jazz fan. I didn't grow up here. If I grew up here, it would be different. Maybe not. I don't know. But I'm invested in following the team, but they don't owe me anything. It's something that again give us some meat that we can chew on to see what the plan is. You don't have to expose everything. I mean, if you draft number one, then there is no secret.
They're taking Cooper Flagg. We don't need to hear anything else. We already know.
Right. But then you wonder, do you want to go through it again for 26? Because if they do,
that to me is a huge question.
That's fine.
That's a huge question right there.
Yeah.
Because as recently as the last 24 hours, I've heard somebody who's way into this go on and on about 26, and they were 5 players deep, and they were super excited. Now, the odds of all those 5 panning out, they're talking about teenagers, but nonetheless, they're just talking, they've never been back-to-back drafts like this. There's so much talent, and they were just... and this isn't a Jazz person. This is an observer of the basketball at the national, level, talking about McDonald's All-Americans and Duke's loaded again. I don't know who it was. I came in the middle of a thing on a national show, and they didn't identify who it was, and I got where I was going.
That's bad host.
Yeah, well.
You should always reset.
Always reset.
Because people join in the middle.
It wasn't the first time that you or I have read or heard something like that, and they were just super pumped about the future for these young players.
Great. But I think they owe it to the fans. We're going to take a major step in a rebuild this year. And what you saw this year in terms of playing the young players, they don't have to say, hey, we're going to go out and deliberately lose. You can't say that. You get fined. What they can say is, we're still in the rebuild process, and we expect our young players to receive a great opportunity if they prove worthy of it, right? That's telling us what we did this year, we're going to do next year. So then we know. I really don't think there's anything wrong with that. I would be on board if they said that, and at least I know as a fan. Okay, I got to prepare myself for watching the younger kids develop. Now, say they get a top 3 pick. I got any one of the Rutgers kids or Flagg, and I got Hendricks coming back, and so forth and so on.
Right.
That's intriguing enough to me. There's storylines there.
There's plenty of storylines. How much is Collier going to improve his shooting in the offseason? How much weight is Cody Williams going to put on? How is Hendricks going to look when he comes back from injury? And you can make some progress, while you're out injured. I mean, his body can fill out and that kind of stuff. There's other stuff he can't. So there are plenty of young players, plenty of draft picks. I mean, Kessler's taking a big step forward this year, but he's just going to be, supposed to continue to get better. Not a finished product yet. It was a really good step forward for him this year, but do more.
Yeah.
So there will be plenty of storylines.
So I don't see why they can't come out and give us a little bit of insight into what the plan is without showing us A to Z the plan. And I think the fans deserve that. And I actually think they will. I think when Ainge and Jay-Z speak, I think we'll actually get a good amount of insight. And we'll be able to see. But on the other hand, maybe they think, hey, Flag, this is a guy who is just like a one in whatever time frame you want to put on as a player. And we get him, man, we already got Collins and Marketing. These are good NBA players. So now we got Kessler. That's 4 high-quality big guys right there. How many teams have that? You know what I mean? They could possibly say, we think we got a chance to be significantly better. I don't expect them to say, hey, my gosh, we're going to jump in the pool here and we're going to start swimming, so we're going to make a bunch of moves, because you don't want to tip your hand to the league. I get the cat and mouse game that has to be played, and I appreciate that and I respect that. But they can say it in a way that lets discerning fans know, okay, they're not going to do what we did these last couple years, and we're not going to sit John Collins basically any chance we get in February, March, and a couple of weeks in April. You know what I mean there? That might be a possibility.
The tipping of the hand will be minimized. And partly, I think there's a couple reasons. One, you can't get yourself fined by the league and get yourself under the microscope because the league has ways of taking it out on you. And the other thing is, for a lot of what they do, they don't control. They might have an idea of a trade that could be made, but it's never done until it's done. So there's no reason to go down that road. We want to be active in the offseason. We've heard that said by multiple GMs in multiple leagues over times. But when you want to be active in the offseason, the player's got to want to come as a free agent, or the other team's got to agree to the trade. You don't hold all the cards. And that's why, and Ainge has been really, in the 2 times a year when he talks, he's been really clear about that the plan is to be ready for the opportunity. And, he spelled out that time in Boston where they thought they were going to have a top pick. They had 2 high picks, and they thought they had great odds to get Tim Duncan, and it didn't work, right? But then all of a sudden you got the 5th pick, and all of a sudden Kevin Garnett's available. So you pivot, and you go get Kevin Garnett.
Oh, I think there's many players that could be available.
That was his point. Who will be available and when, be prepared for whoever it is, whenever it is.
Well, you make them available. You're acting like they have to sit back and somebody else has to make them available. I don't think that's necessarily the case. If I overwhelm you with an offer, that player is available.
Yeah, but you don't want to overpay for the player either. Ainge really doesn't. I mean, Ainge wants to get everybody for 80 cents on the dollar.
Who doesn't?
He seems dedicated to it.
I don't know. I mean, just make good moves. I mean, you can't be cautious. He's 66 years old. The team is going to go through a 4th or 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th losing season in a row. At some point, come on, you got to pull the trigger. You got to get off the pot. And who cares if you make your team better and you help somebody else, what are you worried about what they're doing if your team is better? If your team is now in a position to make a run and add some more stuff because you still have a whole lot of draft capital available down the road, I don't like that philosophy. I'm not going to make a move unless I'm guaranteed to make that I'm going to come out the winner, and the Boston media and those guys are going to praise me. Forget that. You got to take a risk in life here, or else you're never going to get anywhere. You're just going to keep losing and trying to build through the draft? That's a significant way to build, but you've got to do other things upon that. And if you get a kid like Flag, or if an Ace Bailey blows up and he ends up being a top 15 player by year 3 or 4, those other types of players that you need become easier to acquire. The Matt Harperings, the Okers of the world, they become way easier. because they're more common. The pool of those players is much bigger than the pool of the star players. But if I got the star players, then the secondary players, which was the classic ultimate secondary best example I think they've ever had, is Hornacek.
DJ PK, it's 97.5 The Zone. We got to take a break. Coming up in the 8 o'clock hour, Jeff Judkins, former BYU women's basketball coach. They've hired a new coach at BYU. We'll talk with Juddy. We'll talk a little Final Four with him as well. That's coming up at 8:30 right here on The Zone.